Today's guest walks us through dark woods, burned out towns, and unsettling basements, but somehow still makes you want to say a while. Kalvin Ellis is the author of In the Hills Above the Gristmill, In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet, and most recently, Bury My Body Somewhere Nice. His work is unsettling, but in the best way possible, blending gothic dread with emotional depth and psychological nuance. Stay with me and let's have a conversation with Kalvin Ellis about his writing, his life, and what brought him to the point where he is giving us these amazing books. Kalvin, thank you for joining me today. It's very nice to meet you finally in person, to put, more of a face to the writer of these fantastic horror books. I would like you to start off. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you?
A little bit about me. All right.
Yeah.
I'm Calvin Ellis. I am a horror writer. Um, I live in Colorado, right outside Denver. I'm a father of three amazing human beings, all
Oh,
adults
wow.
now. But yeah, what else is there to know about me? Those are the big points, I guess. I am a specialist in safety and security. I was in law enforcement and some government work early on in my career. And now I do all sorts of different stuff, including writing horror and mystery novels.
Let's start out from the beginning. Were you a book kid? Were you one of those kids that were
Oh,
always
yeah.
reading? So tell me a little bit about that. About your childhood and books. How did those intertwine?
Absolutely, yeah. I was heavily a book kid. I was a movie kid first and foremost, and
Hmm.
TV. Loved movie and
Okay.
TVs. I spent a lot of time. My parents owned a video store when I was a kid, and I spent a lot of time in
Oh,
there just watching movies in the back room of the video store. And I spent, the majority of days after school, when we lived near the video store, I'd go to the video store, pick up some movies, go home and just watch movies all day. And then when my parents' video store moved, they moved next door to a bookstore. And I was about 8 years old, 9 years old. And I just started going into the bookstore all the time when, if my stepdad needed to use his office, I just go into go over to the bookstore instead and just pick up anything I could find. And luckily the bookstore owner was very kind and just let me spend all the time I wanted in there. Never told me to move or get out of the way or anything. Just let me spend my afternoons in there. And so I would just go in and read anything I could get my hands on.
oh my gosh, that sounds like a dream.
It was fantastic.
Wow. So you were you like really popular with your friends because you could get like any movie?
Mm,
Or
Uh, they did appreciate that, but I didn't have a ton of friends back then, so nobody ever really, got to take advantage of that. But I know it worked out well for my brother. My brother was very popular because of that, but he was also older, and my parents' video store had a pretty large selection of adult movies, so my brother was
oh,
really
okay.
popular because of
Yeah, that
that.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So when did your love of horror come into this? Was it with the movies? Was it with the books? Is it a mix?
A bit of a mix of both. And this might be redundant for anybody that's read my new book because my dedication is kind of exactly what I've just said about I talk
Hmm.
about the video store and the bookstore. But when I was younger, my little brother passed away. He drowned right in front of me, and my older brother, to kind of punish me, locked me in a room when I was 4 years old. He locked me in a room and made me watch Children of the Corn. And he came
Wow.
back in after the movie was over, thinking that I would be traumatized from it, and I just asked if we could watch it again. Uh, and so from then on, I've had a love of horror movies. I really like horror that you can like, that it's fake. When you're watching a movie or reading a book, that if you need to, you can push pause, you can put a
Hmm.
bookmark in, you can come back to it. It kind of trains us for the horrors of real life. And so from a very young age, I've really loved horror movies. And, when my mom started working at the video store, I remember the first day she came home. She said, "Well, tell me what movies you want," and I didn't know what to pick, and so I just said GI Joe. And she came home and she had a My Little Pony movie for my sister, GI Joe movie for me, some other movies for my younger siblings, and then Nightmare on Elm Street for my older brother. And I remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street and thinking, "Oh, this is this is what I want to do with my life. I want to make people have these kind of reactions." So,
Mhm.
yes, I was loved horror from a very young age.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if there was any certain horror movie that kind of started you on this path. So Nightmare on Elm
Nightmare
Street.
on Elm Street, yeah, probably Nightmare on Elm Street, just because it was the first. Like I saw Children of the Corn earlier, I just didn't
Hmm.
understand really what I was watching, and then when I saw Nightmare on
Yeah.
Elm Street, I remember thinking when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street that you could create these villains that just stuck with you, because I
Mm.
thought about that Freddy Krueger every single day after I saw that movie for probably 2 or 3 years.
How old were you?
I think I was 7 at the time.
Okay. All right. Wow. And it didn't give you nightmares. It was more just like, how cool is this guy? He can
It
get you
was, it,
to your
yeah.
dreams.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it is the only time I ever remember having a nightmare about a movie, and it was Freddy Krueger.
Okay.
But I remember waking up from the nightmare after being murdered by Freddy Krueger and thinking that was really cool. It was like a sequel to the movie that I am the only person that got to see. I was kind of a weird kid,
No,
but
no,
yeah,
believe
I
me,
woke up a
it's
lot thinking about that character.
I completely understand. I was a horror kid too. Scary Stories You Can Tell in the Dark was like my
Yes,
Bible. Like I
loved
have
that
it
book.
still. It's such a good book. So
Me too.
the movie, no, I
Not so
can't with the
much,
movie.
not so
No,
much the
but
movie.
I love those folk horror stories. Just
They're
amazing.
just so good, so good, and
Yeah,
they like talk about a book that just kind of spoke to an entire generation of kids.
definitely. And it was
Yeah.
available in the library for all of us.
Yes, it felt like horror created specifically for us.
Hmm. So do you find writing horror kind of cathartic then? Or do
Oh
you
yeah,
see it
for
more,
sure.
yeah? Because you mentioned before that it gives you kind of a feeling of what to do in certain situations,
Hmm.
possibly. How about you go ahead
Yeah,
and explain?
yeah. It feels kind of like practice. Like reading
Practice.
horror and writing horror is like you get to deal with feelings
Hmm.
that are hard to deal with in other ways. Like it's cathartic. You can deal with different types of stress. My series, the Paisley Mott series, focuses on a person who has a lot of anxiety, and that's the first book in the Hills Above the Gristmill. And Paisley deals with a lot of anxiety
Hmm.
about a lot of things, and she has to do a lot of masking. And so, when I was writing that first book, I wanted to make sure that I addressed things that I deal with in my own personal life, and I have a lot of anxiety, and so I wanted a character that saw that anxiety because I know a lot of people that are anxious pick up on everything.
Yep.
They see everything because they're hyper aware, and so I kind of
Yes.
wrote a character that gave her that she turned that into kind of a superpower, that she
Hmm.
could see details that other people might miss, and that comes from trauma. I know as
Yes.
myself being a child of neglect and abuse, I tend to notice people's patterns a little more,
Hmm.
and I think that a lot of people with ADHD and or traumatic backgrounds tend to do that often. They're always aware of their surroundings, and so writing horror gives me the ability to kind of put those things that I struggle with onto a page, and it's kind of like therapy. It doesn't replace therapy. I think therapy is still very important, but it is a type of therapy for me so that I can sit down and write about kind of what's inside without having to, you know, fight the demons in another way, I guess is the best way to put it.
So you're fighting them on paper instead of having
Exactly.
you have a character who's going to be hyper vigilant for you, instead of maybe being hyper vigilant yourself. Though it's probably very difficult to move out of that kind of mindset when it's something that you grow up into as always. How is this person going to react when they say this? How is this person? How did this conversation really go? That kind of thing. Where's the
Yeah.
door when I enter the room? Yes.
Yes. because those of us who struggle with that know that we think about those things but never get to like live them out. We'll play a scenario out in our room or in our heads where like, well, what if somebody entered a room and A, B, and C happened, and we think about those things because the trauma that we're dealing with, but we never actually get to see those things through. We think them through in our own head. Like we'll be sitting in a restaurant and like, well, what if somebody walked through the door and A, B, and C happened? As a writer, I get to say, well, this is what would happen if that happened, and this is how this character would respond. So it definitely allows me to kind of run down those scenarios that I think get stuck in all of our heads.
Definitely. Definitely. I think Paisley Mott, for example, is a very good character, very good representation of that. First of all, of a person who's gone through kind of very difficult situations and also kind of a neurodivergent person as well.
Hmm.
Definitely with her kind of um, hypervigilance, hyper, oh, well, maybe not vigilance, but awareness of everything around her.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting take on the stories, especially with her investigating and everything. It's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Thank you. Thank you. I really wanted to focus on like the neurodivergence of it all. So thank you for
Hmm.
bringing that up. I wanted characters that have that just exist, like that all of us know and all of us are. I don't think the neuronormative idea of that everybody's the same is just doesn't hold up. And so I wanted to write a book where characters were different and we didn't point out. Paisley's hypervigilance or hyper awareness is the only thing that is ever really pointed out as a any sort of thing that sets her apart in any way.
Hmm.
Whereas there is a character in the book who is, if you know somebody like that, you recognize the traits immediately. But there's somebody that's on the autism spectrum in the
Hmm.
book, very clearly on the autism spectrum, but it's never called out, it's never brought up because it doesn't need to be.
Hmm.
The character just exists, and I wanted to make sure that because that's what we all live in our own little horrors, and we all struggle with our own things every day, and I wanted to show how people with those neurodivergent traits could survive day to day in an actual horror setting. So
And
I really
yeah,
liked that about that's what I really like about writing, and that's why it's so cathartic.
because you're showing actual people, like
Yeah.
how real people in the real society are, not some like made up person that has no flaws and is perfect at
Right.
everything and just does everything
Hmm.
well and has all of society already figured out because nobody does. Nobody
Nobody
does.
does. Nobody does. And to that end, sorry to just continue to talk about the first
Go
book, but
ahead.
there is a character in the book who is also comes across as, like you said, perfect and flawless. And then the more we get to know that character, we find out they are not. They struggle with
Mm.
all of the same things everybody else does. They are they're self-conscious. They're concerned about things. They feel trapped in a way that other people might not understand. And I also painted that with a lens of how does the internet respond to that, and what is the reaction of, oh, if you're flawless on the internet, you're going to get a lot of negative attention that I don't think the general public, might not understand, and
Hmm.
what that does to a person's mental health.
Yeah. But generally, the internet and mental health do not go well together.
No,
Um,
no, they do
no.
not.
So what is your ideal writing environment? Where do you tend to write?
Great question. Um, I I used to have a really good answer for this, and it was just like very specific. And then I realized that if I ever wanted to be an actual writer, I needed to learn to write everywhere. I love writing at home, in my
Hmm.
office, right here in this chair. I have like all the things because I'm neurodivergent. It is very hard for me to focus. I have a very, very difficult version of ADHD, and so
Hmm.
I can't focus on anything for more than a couple of seconds. When I finally got diagnosed, the doctor it was after the first book came out, and
Oh,
said
okay. Wow. Late
the doctor
diagnosis.
said, how did you write a book with this severe of ADHD, and I told him 10 seconds at a time. Like that's, and that was very accurate. And then he made a joke about that should be my the title of my autobiography, and I said I don't think that is the title that I want. But so I have like all these little things like sorry, I've got like this little hourglass that I have to
Hmm.
have next to my computer because it's a 6 minute timer, and I
Okay.
have to set it when I start writing. I also have like candles over here that, so I have to have a ritual. If I don't have a ritual, it doesn't. My brain just has a hard time kind of fitting into where it needs to go to
Yeah.
get to that place. And so when I start writing, I have to put my phone down, face down, and I turn the timer upside down, and I put the timer upside down on my phone. And I notice I look over at my phone and go to pick it up because I'll like halfway through a sentence, I'll be like, oh, I need to check my phone. And if I look and the hourglass still has sand in it, I have to flip it over. And
Okay.
so there will be times when I'll look at it so many times that the hourglass is just constantly flipping and never runs out of sand because it's just always moving. And if I look over and the sand is gone, I can pick up my phone, scroll for a minute, do whatever it is for a minute, and then put it back down, flip the hourglass back over, and go again. I also have like a Rubik's Cube that
Hmm.
anytime, and so sometimes when I'm thinking about picking up my phone, instead of picking up my phone, it's just like me telling myself, well, my brain needs a distraction. And so I'll like solve the Rubik's Cube really quick. And then once it's solved, sorry, this is probably terrible for audio.
That's perfect
Once
ASMR. I love it.
Once it's solved, I put it back down, and then I flip the timer back over and I try to get back to work.
Hmm.
So in my office, all of those things exist, and it makes it easy to write. So that's kind of what it's like writing at home, and so that's my
Hmm.
ideal environment. But to be a successful writer, realize that I have to write when I can, because another problem with having such a severe case of ADHD is my short-term memory doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
so if I'm out and about and I have an idea, I have to put that idea down somewhere. And so like I carry like little notebooks, these little field books with me, and pens
Hmm.
everywhere I go so that I can jot down my ideas. But what's better than that is if I can just stop and write. So like sometimes, at my not so much at my current job, but at my old job, like I could take a few minutes and write if I needed to. I could step away from things and write just for a minute, just to get the idea
Hmm.
down. Or I'd go to a coffee shop or like when I'm at the airport, I love to just pull out. I have sorry, I have a lot of props today. I
I
have
love
like
it.
a little free write that I use. So it's just a little,
Oh my
keyboard
gosh.
with a
I have
distraction
never
free
heard of that,
writing.
but that has to be very useful.
Oh, it is incredibly useful because you can't get on the internet or anything with it. So I have to
Mm.
be, for a while I would just use my phone. I have like the flip phone, and so I would
Okay.
just get a Bluetooth keyboard and set it, and then my phone's right there, and it's like, well, let me check this, or
And the message
notifications
comes
would be
up and you're like,
popping up.
oh, yeah.
Exactly. And so when I sit down with the free write to do something, I have to, put my phone away, and then just focus on that. And you can't get on the line with it. It doesn't tell you when words are misspelled, unfortunately, because my spelling is absolutely atrocious. But it allows you to just continue to go. You can't go back up. You can't scroll up on it. You can backspace, but that's about it. So I
Okay.
can't go and check like what I've written or change big swaths of things. So it's all about just kind of stream of consciousness writing. And so for me, my ideal would be at home where I have all these things put into place. But when I'm out and about, I can write just about anywhere as long as I've got something like the free write with me so that I can really focus on it and not get distracted. Because a little distraction, I'm gone.
And for example, your strategy with Hourglass, is that something that you developed like on your own when you started writing, or did you find a tip online, or did your doctor tell you, psychologist, psychiatrist? Where did you get that? Because it's amazing. I'm gonna go buy an Hourglass right now. Like that is
Um,
such a good idea.
I made that one up on my own. I've always loved hourglasses, and I have no idea
Okay.
why. So I have like multiple hourglasses around my office here. But then I bought this one with these little skulls in it,
Ooh,
and so
love it.
Uh, and I was writing one day and I just had it on my desk and it felt nice to watch the sand like go through. And I was just like, oh, I should try to find a way to use this 6 minute timer to my benefit. And then one day I just like put my phone underneath it and I was just like, oh, here we go. Like this is if I set this on top of my phone and I just refuse to pick up my phone if there's still sand falling, then it'll give me some time. And sometimes, I'll write for more than 6 minutes and look over and the sand is gone, and I'm like, oh, I can pick up my phone, which is feels like a nice little reward for
Mhm.
writing for just 6 minutes. But 6 minutes for me feels like an eternity. So
It
yeah, it's
is a
just
long
something I,
time.
I came up with out of necessity, really.
Wow, that's fantastic, and I'm definitely stealing that. I hope you don't mind because
Please do.
I have ADHD. That yeah, concentration is definitely keeping my mind focused on something. It is not easy. So I
No.
totally understand all of the props, all the things around your office, and I also wrote down the free write thing because I might be looking into that as well.
It's
Um,
really nice, and there's a couple other companies that are making a similar product now that
mhm.
are probably cheaper than the free rate, but the free rate is it was the right product for me at the right time. So I
Fantastic.
suggest if anyone's interested in looking into it, they look into some other ones too, just to see what's right for them. But
Mhm.
it is a great thing to have, and it's really helpful.
Let's get into your books then. So, you originally started off in, I think you said security and kind of law enforcement. That's
Hmm.
correct. How did we
Yeah,
go
safety and
from
security. Yeah.
safety and security? Okay, how
Mhm.
did we go from safety and security to into the hills above the
um,
gristmill?
well, safety and security was always kind of just the day job.
Mhm.
But safety and security also came from the same place. It came from
Yes.
that ability to kind of see every possible outcome of a
Hmm.
situation, and so it made me really good at that aspect of the jobs. And so early on in my career, the way that I kind of developed in my career was by uh, being able to consult with companies and say, here's all of the risks that you're running, and here's kind of how you look for, profiling, but not profiling for like, the things you think of when you think of profiling. You think of like profiling based on race or ethnicity or something like, all these different things that are honestly just the worst possible way to look for anybody. Instead, we profile based on behaviors. So
Yes.
I became a behavioral expert early on, and got really good at training people how to look for observable behaviors of like micro expressions. So this
Okay.
person is walking this way, or they're looking this way, or we notice small ticks, and that doesn't mean that the person is definitely going to do something wrong. It just gives us something to watch. And so doing that for so long, I started thinking about I've wanted to be a writer my whole life. I've been writing short stories and such my whole life. And then as I got older, I was just like, oh, I should put some of this knowledge to use. And wrote a couple of different stories with a couple of different characters. And then Paisley Mott was a side character in another story I was writing, and I decided to give her some of the neurodivergent traits. And the more
Hmm.
I wrote about her, the more I liked her. And I was just like, this should be the main character of my book. This person deserves the spotlight. And she was based on two of my kids, my daughters. And
Oh wow.
I thought, well, she definitely deserves a spotlight. And so I stopped writing everything else I was working on and started working on In the Hills Above the Gristmill. And uh, the career path stayed. I still kind of I don't work in safety and security at the moment, but safety and security led to being a director of operations for some places, and an executive director in a couple places. And so the career just kind of it slowly split off
Hmm.
from the writing, but it started from writing start the specific writing that I do started from safety and security, and that just trying to solve those mysteries, and like thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, like with a lot of times people with neurodivergence will go down 1,000 different roads, and like what if, what if, what if, what if, and I just wrote a book about what if.
The second book in the Paisley Mott series is called In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet. This book is much darker than this book.
Yeah,
Tell, t
yeah, much
tell
much
me how
darker.
we went from this, which is it's dark, to this. How did
To
this?
very dark.
Yes.
Um, it's a it's a weird story about like feeling very self-conscious about my writing. When I
Mhm.
wrote In the Hills Above the Gristmill, it was the original draft was darker. It was there was more
Okay.
horror in it. And then I was querying it to agents, and I had started talking to one agent, and she said that first she wanted me to change the ending, which I did not want to change. She wanted me to take out there's at the end of one of the chapters, at the end of like the second chapter, there's like a harsh like turn of phrase that she wanted me
Mhm.
to take out, and I was like, I really like that, I think it's funny, and she didn't want me to keep it. But she also said that I should lean into the mystery of it because mystery was selling better, and I had never
Okay.
had an agent, and I was like
Yeah.
excited about this, and so I was just like, okay, well, maybe I should. And so I kind of scraped some of the horror and I nerfed it a little bit. and
Mhm.
um and then, so first she said I should change it and make it a little more mystery than horror. And so I did that first. And then she was just like, now change the ending because first time authors shouldn't write series because nobody, you're not going to be able to market a book if people don't think it has a solid ending. And there is a little ambiguity at the end of the first book. And so I turned it leans more mystery thriller than it does horror. And so I always tell people that the first one is 80% mystery and 20% horror. And the second one
Mhm.
is 80% horror, 20% mystery. Even though there is a very, an even deeper mystery in the second book, it is overshadowed by some of the horror. And so when writing, after writing the first book and putting it out, I still consider it horror. It's, not, it's a light
Yeah.
horror.
Hmm.
But I did get some pushback from people and some reviews that said this isn't really horror, and I was just like, dang, I wanted to write a horror book, and so I wanted to make sure that the second one was very obvious. But I also didn't want to. I was very specific and intentional about Paisley's journey, and so I
Mhm.
wanted, if the books were going to change, then the story had to change for Paisley as well. And so in the first book, her website and her YouTube show is called Paranormal or Not with Paisley Mott, and her whole thing is about investigating: is this thing paranormal or is it not paranormal? Is
Yeah.
it something that can be explained? And so in the first book, we are left, small spoiler alert, wondering if the thing was paranormal or not. And so in
Mhm.
the second book, I had to take a really big swing and decide because I couldn't leave that ambiguity again. I had to either say no, it wasn't, or yes, it is. And so I wanted to take a really, really big swing at the horror, and make it feel as jarring for the audience as it does for Paisley. And so I that's why the book takes such a hard turn. The second book takes such a hard turn and is so intense with some of the horror, is because I really felt like the only way to get that message across for the reader is to make sure that Paisley saw that message as well.
And part of that message being, you guys want horror, I'll give you horror.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, and every type of horror. It is graphic and sad, and there's
Mhm.
just all sorts of different types of horror in that book.
Yeah. Just the title. Just the title. It's like, I'm sorry. I love it. How did you come up with it? I mean, the first one, it makes sense. Okay. The second one, I get it, but how do you come up with your titles for your books?
The first title. So the first book came about, like I mentioned earlier, like how Paisley came about as a character, but the first
Hmm.
book came about from having a conversation with a librarian friend of mine who told me that Bigfoot was scarier than ghosts, because I used to host this, like I sold out this ghost tour for 17 years straight. I wrote hosted this ghost tour, and so I was, oh, I'm writing the ghost stories, and she was just like, ghosts aren't that scary, and I was like, ghosts are very scary, and she said Bigfoot is way scarier than ghosts, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to write a book about Bigfoot, and so that's In the Hills Above the Gristmill came from there, and when I was looking for a title, that same friend told me the title of a book, and she was just like, I really like titles like this. And she's told, and so I was just like, all right, well, and like right after she said that, I said In the Hills Above the Gristmill. Like it had the same kind of, and I was just like, oh, that's the title of the book. And
Hmm.
so it kind of just stuck. I don't think it's the perfect title for the book, but it's the title that I couldn't get out of my head. Whereas the second book, I was working on it. I didn't have a title for it yet, and somebody like there was one of those like funny little memes that's just like meant to throw you off, and it said, "Just a reminder, your bones are wet," and the only time they're ever dry is after you're dead. And so I was just like, "Oh, that's really weird. That's a
I love
weird piece
that.
of body horror fiction, facts that I like." And so I wanted to write that into the title somehow, but it also had to, and if you haven't read the book, you don't understand how good that title really is. And then once you've read the book, you realize how well that title fits to what's happening. And it's quite disturbing.
I've heard that fact before. I did not put it in, but yeah. Um, fun fact. That's
Yeah,
something you
I
think
like
about.
yes, and I like to start the books with body facts, weird body horror facts. Like the first book starts with, "It takes 8 pounds of pressure to rip off a human ear." That is a
Hmm.
fact. It only takes 8 pounds of pressure to rip off a human ear. And then the second one is the average. On average, humans have more than one skeleton. I just really like to put these weird facts that make people like either gross them out or make them think about stuff. And so it fit well with the second title.
Did you know human bones are pretty sticky?
Gross, but
Gross.
I like that.
I studied, I have a degree in anthropology, and I had to study
Oh, cool.
osteology, and we got our own skeleton that we had to go through and touch and find the little bits and things on it. And the bones would stick to your fingers. So I have like
Oh,
phalanges, like little bits of bone like sticking to, I would like pick them up like this.
oh,
They were
gross.
sticky. I don't know
Is
if
it
it
because
was
they're
how
so
they,
porous?
I don't know how because that yeah I don't know if it's how they're preserved at the university or what goes with that, but yeah, also how they lick bones like to
Yeah,
see if they'll
yeah,
stick
to
or
see if they're
not.
actual
Yeah,
bone. Yeah,
yeah, but
gross.
I always like remember like playing with like popping all these human bones around and they were sticky and everyone else in class was like they're sticky. I'm like, yeah, these bones are sticky. They didn't like there has to be something with the preservation, but like
Well, that's a fun fact.
fun
All right,
fact.
going in the next book.
Next book, human bones often are sticky.
Oh,
So
sticky.
So talking about bodies and bones and getting off of our little tangent there, you just released a book of short horror stories,
I
very
did.
original short horror stories that come from different points of view, different, just a whole bunch of different characters and consciousness, and a lot of things are going on. How did
Yeah.
this come about? First,
Um,
go ahead and tell us about the book, the name and everything, and then tell us,
sure.
yeah,
The book is called Bury My Body Somewhere Nice, and it is a
beautiful.
collection of five short stories. One of them is actually short. The others are a little long for short stories, but not like ridiculously long or anything. None of them are
Hmm.
novellas. The whole book is only 41,000 words, so it's pretty short. But I had planned out to write 12 short stories for the book, and I just picked five because I wanted it to be very consumable. I wanted it to, and one of the main points of this book is I wanted it to fit in people's back pocket. And so I designed
Oh,
it exactly like mass market trade paperback because when I was
hmm.
younger, I used to keep a trade paperback or a mass market paperback in my back pocket all the time. And so if I ever had a
Yes.
chance to sit down and read, I mean, this is before cell phones, so I would just keep one in my back pocket and pull it out. And so actually the publisher or the the publisher that I used, they have groundwood paper, which is the same type of paper used in mass market paperbacks. And so the book
Mhm.
is actually 2 ounces lighter than it would be if it was published with regular paper. It's just a side note. But the stories themselves, I wanted them to be the kind of story that you could just sit down and just want to consume really quickly, like a little snack.
Mhm.
And some of the stories that I wrote of the 12 were a little heavier, dealt with different themes. Or there's one really good sci-fi short story that I wrote about space that I loved, but I was like, it doesn't fit in what I'm trying to write.
Okay.
And so I wanted to come up with stories that were very different and it didn't you never really knew where they were going until they were there. And then once you're there, you're just like, oh, that was a weird trip. And then I kind of bookended it with these two fables about kind of sentient objects becoming, or or non-sentient objects becoming sentient, and like getting a point of view of a pair of scissors. Um, and so yeah, that's how they came up. They were just always bouncing around in my head. One of the short stories, Atomic Despair, was I did like a very short-lived YouTube series on like tips from a writer, and one of
Mhm.
the those episodes, I was just like, this is how this is how my brain processes things and where I come up with stories, and I just started talking about like if you're driving down the street and you see this thing, here's what it was. And you can see me in that episode actually develop the story for Atomic Despair.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and like, you drive past this old abandoned gas station and there's this, oil can statue outside. And the oil can statue starts to wonder, well, all the traffic is gone. Everybody in the world must be dead. And so that was the beginning of the story. And so most of the stories came from something like that, like a conversation I was having with somebody else, or Scissors, a love story. I had just bought a pair of like really good scissors. Oh, actually, no, I didn't buy them. They belonged to my partner, and I found them, and I was just like, oh, what are these? Are some like serious scissors. And she was just like, oh yeah, those are only for cutting like specific things. And I just was like,
Were they fabric scissors?
they were fabric scissors. She told me I can never cut paper with them.
Yes.
Um, and they were fabric scissors and they felt so impressive. And I was just like, you could really kill somebody with these things. And then that's like that. I think the next day I was sitting in front of my kids' school waiting for them to get out. And I wrote Scissors, a Love Story on my old iPhone 3. That's how long ago I wrote it.
Wow.
And I just wrote it on my phone while sitting out in front of my kids' school. And it became one of my favorite things I ever wrote. And so I was I tried to like query it and sell it to a magazine for years, and nobody ever wanted it. They said it was either not horror enough, or it was too horror, or it was too weird, because it is very weird. And so I was just like, oh, maybe I'm not meant to publish with other people, and I'll just keep these to myself. And then eventually publish it. And then it became the lead story in Bury My Body Somewhere Nice.
And it's a story that sticks in your mind too. It
Thank
doesn't
you.
always just it's not just I have scissors here. They're not as cool as the scissors. I like the scissors in the story, like they have that fabric scissor vibe in my head. Like I have a
Yes.
pair, but they're not close. But like they're not just a pair of scissors. It's
They're
like
not just, they're a tool.
they're a tool.
Yeah.
They're a life partner. They're something that's there for you when you
Yes.
need them
Thank
for
you.
anything. It's just you
Um,
don't think about that, but
you get it. You get
I
it.
get it. I
And I
definitely do.
drew this little thing and I tried to draw the fabric scissors the best I could, in the little illustration in the book. But that's exactly what I was thinking of, is those like Ginger or whatever. I can't remember the brand name, but
Mhm.
those exact scissors. And they feel like a thing you can just keep your whole life. Like they're durable, and they can cut through literally anything. So yeah, it
You
felt
still
like they deserved to have a story told about them.
so my next question is well, I have so many. Okay, which of your short stories was the most fun to write?
Oh, good question. The most fun to write, probably Bury
Yeah.
My Body Somewhere Nice. Bury
Hmm.
My Body Somewhere Nice was one of the most enjoyable experiences I ever had writing anything,
Hmm.
because it is just so weird and so silly, but also has like a lot of heart buried inside of it. It's just got these weird levels, and I kept trying to play with the levels. Like on the surface, it's kind of sad, and then it gets
Yeah.
disturbing, and then it gets really sweet. And then if you step back and look at the whole thing as a whole, it's even more disturbing and sad than we thought because it's very clear mental health crisis. And but writing the story was just a ton of fun because I'm a filmmaker before I'm a novelist. And so
Mhm.
everything I see in terms of like, how is this going to be shot as a movie? And if I was making a movie, what is the shot going to look like? And so writing that story, all I could think of was, I can't wait to turn this into a film. And so a lot of the comedy beats in it are set up so that if it's ever filmed as a movie, it's just a direct translation. And so I really, really enjoyed writing that story because of the premise, I can just let loose with the jokes and not have to worry about anything. Like the Paisley Mott books, I'm really proud of the fact that they're pretty funny. There's some really good jokes in there, but all of the jokes in that story come from the characters. So
Mhm.
in Paisley Mott's world, the world is not a funny place. It's a very sad place.
Yeah.
But Paisley deals with it much like a lot of us with neurodivergence, with humor, and we
Mhm.
joke about things when we shouldn't. And that's where the humor comes from her, is comes from that the tension of that. And then in Bury My Body Somewhere Nice, specifically the story Bury My Body Somewhere Nice, the jokes can come from everywhere because we're in such an absurd situation that anything can happen and we can draw a joke from it. And so I really enjoyed being able to just kind of write with that kind of freedom.
Do you find it easier to write short stories compared to longer stories?
Oh, absolutely. And
Really?
I never considered myself a short story writer. I thought I was
Hmm.
terrible at it. Because
No.
I have a oh, thank you. I have a really hard time letting plot points go, and
Hmm.
not. I get this like obsessive need to close every loophole. Which,
Yeah.
if you've read uh, In the Hills Above the Gristmill and In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet, like it feels like there's loophole or open holes, but they're not.
Hmm.
They're absolutely not. Every single word in those books is intentional. And so if something feels out of place, it's because it's going to fit somewhere later, in later down the road in the series. And so it takes, I mean, it took me 4 years to write In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet because I
Hmm.
couldn't, there was one scene where a thing happened and I couldn't justify the character doing the thing that happens, even though it's a character that we don't really like, that he could do whatever he wanted and nobody would probably bat an eye. But I, as the writer, couldn't justify. I was like, that character wouldn't actually do it that way. And so I had to rewrite the whole story to make it so that the character, it made sense for the character to behave in a way that the character was behaving.
Hmm.
In short stories, I don't have to worry about that. They don't need a backstory. They don't need a future. They just need this one little snapshot. And so I didn't know that I would be good at it. Even though I've always done it, I've always written short stories. I just never thought anyone would ever read them. They were always kind of just practices for individual scenes, and then I would build stories out of them. In the Hills Above the Gristmill, originally, the first thing I ever wrote on that book was there's a scene when with Hollis in a church and he's giving a sermon. And that was, I wrote that and it had nothing to do with the book. And
Hmm.
then when I was done with that and I started thinking about writing this book for Paisley Mott, I was just like, oh, I've got this scene that I wrote. Let me put the two together. And so when I write short stories, it's kind of that same thing. It's just like a snapshot of something bigger. But then I realized if I do that, I don't have to worry about the backstory. I don't have, nothing has to connect. It doesn't have to make sense. I can just tell a short little story. And so it became way easier to write those things. And I would just like Atomic Despair, I'd been thinking about for years since I recorded that YouTube episode. And then I sat down and wrote it in like a day and a half. It just came out. Whereas it's very difficult to do that in novel format for me. Thank
So
you.
are there any plans with the Paisley Mott series to continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So there's going to be at least 5 books, possibly 7. It just depends on what Paisley does. There's I don't like to plot things, but when you're dealing with
Hmm.
mystery and overarching series, you have to know kind of where it's going. And
Yeah.
so I know everyone's intent. Everyone that's involved, I know what they intend to do. I just don't know how other characters are going to respond. Paisley has found herself to be much more resilient than I ever gave her credit for in the beginning. Um, and so there is a point when one character, probably in book four, maybe book five, will do something, and I don't know how Paisley is going to react yet. It just depends on how her character builds between now and then. Um, and if she reacts one way, we could get two more books out of it. If she reacts another way, then the story will probably end pretty quickly. And it just depends on how she reacts. And because I'm so true to like, I won't allow a character to do something that doesn't make sense for their character. I
Yeah.
don't really know what that's going to look like yet because a lot of stuff is going to happen to Paisley between now and then. And, if you've read the second book, Paisley's got some very big decisions to make and things are going to happen in her life that are going to change or alter her direction quite a bit.
Do your characters live in your head? I ask this to every author.
Absolutely.
Do they live in your head and they're separate entities, or or are they, well, you already answered the question, but they live in your
Yeah.
head then.
They absolutely live in my head. I actually, this is weird, but I suspect other neurodivergent folks will understand it. I talk to Paisley in my own head, and for
Hmm.
some reason, Paisley calls me Doc. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know where that came from or how it started, but I think it's, I mean, probably from The Shining. Um,
Mm.
but I have this image like whenever I'm struggling with trying to get back to her story, I think about like a conversation with her, and she's always like sitting on a counter, just like the counter just floats there, and it's don't know if it's a workbench in a garage, I don't know if it's a kitchen counter, but she's just sitting there, and she's like, "Hey, Doc, you know, how's it going?" And I'll talk about the story and like treat her as a real human being. Like she'll I put you through a lot in the last one. Yeah, you did, Doc. You really you really messed me up in the last one, and it helps me figure out what's next for her and like how she's
Hmm.
going to deal with the next thing. Um, without giving away too much because I'm not 100% where sure which there's two things that need to happen in Paisley's story, and I don't know which one is going to be the third book and which one is going to be the fourth book, so they could switch back around. But I will talk those things through with Paisley and say,
Hmm.
well, what do you want to do next? Now that this has happened, this thing has happened, these very traumatic things have happened. Where do you want to go next? Do you want to run home? Do you want to go back to Oregon, to Jigsaw Bay, or do you want to, stay in this other place? I don't want to say where because it kind of spoils the beginning of the end of the first book. Um, but I would just have conversations with this character. And now my current work in progress is called Murder and Mayhem at Lake Planchette, and it's kind of a
I love
90s
that.
camp slasher. Thank you.
Ah,
It, it
yes.
it's a 90s camp slasher about this 13-year-old girl who is trying to save a group of scouts because they show up a week early to a jamboree, and there's a cultist group there that is planning to kill all the scouts when they get there. And so they kill some of the scouts, and it's like Home Alone meets Friday the 13th. So it's
I
very
love
goofy,
that.
very funny, and the main character's name is Sibilance Valancourt, and I have conversations with her now too, but they're never just one on one. They're always conversations with her and Paisley Mott. And it's
Do
like,
these
Paisley, where do I take this story? And so,
do these characters live in the same world? In the
yeah,
same
they're in the
universe?
same,
Yeah.
they are in the same universe. There will be a mention of Sibilance Valancourt or Sybil, as everybody calls her,
Mm.
in the Paisley Mott world because this happens, 20 something years before the Paisley Mott books. And so
Okay.
there will be a mention of it just as kind of a nice little Easter egg nod for people that have read both books.
I love that.
But then that book actually ties into another story that I'm working on. It's like a Viking horror thing. So there's like some history there. And so they all tie together. Everything exists in Paisley's world. I mean, the short stories don't. At least maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know if
Those scissors
yeah,
could be.
we could she might come across them at some point, or she might stumble across Hank. Who knows what will happen?
You never know.
You never know.
Well, you could ask. You could always
I
ask.
could, I could ask her, is this a thing that you want to deal with? I could absolutely do that. And she would tell me. And it's kind of how I work things out in my own head.
Mhm. You're not the first author to tell me that, and so far
Excellent.
every author I've talked to has says the same thing. But I do talk to authors that I get along with, like I talk on social media with, and they're probably neurodivergent as well. So maybe I should just call it the neurodivergent indie author podcast.
I
But yeah,
think you have to
everyone,
have some level of neurodivergence to be a writer, to sit
there
in
has to
these
be.
worlds and create stuff like this. It feels like it helps.
I, I like it better that way. I think yeah, much better that way. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you some lightning round questions.
Hit me.
Okay, so what is the creepiest setting for you? We have an abandoned
Hmm.
asylum, foggy swamp, or a cornfield at night.
Who probably the asylum, just
Okay.
because there's also a sense of, I mean, the other two give us kind of like an agoraphobia vibe, but the
Hmm.
claustrophobia of it, being trapped, not, I, you say abandoned asylum, and I think of like going down endless hallways and not being able to ever find your way out, and, feeling like the people that were trapped there. The story kind of just starts to write itself in my head, which is just mentioning it. So yeah, probably an abandoned asylum.
Okay. If you were a character in one of your own books, would you survive?
Ooh, good question.
I know.
Um, without any major spoilers, I am a character in the grave where the bones are still wet. There is a character named Derry who is 100% based on me when I was his age. 16-year-old boy who is people have read that book and messaged me and said, "You, this is just you, right?" Like, and yes, it was just me. And so I don't know if I would survive. I would like to think so, but I would probably put myself in harm's way to save other people, and that's just
Oh,
never that's never a good survival technique in most horror books.
no,
So
it's
probably not.
what's your personal horror nope moment? What is something that you just won't touch in horror?
That I won't write or I won't read.
Either way, something that just freaks you out. Is there anything
Something
that
just
freaks you
for
out?
no, not really.
No.
I can get grossed out, but even gross out stuff, like I don't feel grossed out by it. I just
Hmm.
sometimes I feel like it, and this is no, I don't mean any offense to people that write like extreme stuff, because In the Grave
Hmm.
Where the Bones Are Still Wet has some very extreme horror in it. But there are things that um, I'm not a big fan of writing to gross out just to gross out, to be like, I want to show people that I can gross them out. And so I'll still read it, but I just don't enjoy it as much. And it doesn't really scare me or put me off. It's not my cup of tea. I understand why other people love it. I do, because it can be very fun and funny. It's just not my thing. So
I'm sure
those are
that
kind of my
people, yeah.
nopes.
I'm sure people who write those kind of like splatterpunk type books are
Mhm.
aware that it's not everybody's cup of tea, and they're probably
Yeah,
okay with that.
yeah.
I,
I have
I'd
some
imagine.
good friends. I have some good friends who write it, and they understand. And I'll read it because it's the writing is still good. It's just not necessarily my vibe.
Understandable. Not every book is for every person. That's
Exactly.
so if there was one horror author you could resurrect for dinner and a brainstorming session, who would it
Oh,
be?
interesting. So they have to be dead if I'm resurrecting them, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Um, who would I want? Maybe Edgar Allan Poe.
Hmm.
Um, just because like such a weird, mysterious life he led, and a sad, tragic death. I think that could be really interesting. Or
Yeah.
Mary Shelley, I mean, Mary Shelley, I would want to talk about the writing, but also her life and what it was like to be this woman that created some of the best horror ever written and was just kind of in her time written off for it. So yeah, maybe even Mary Shelley above Edgar Allan Poe.
Fantastic. Yeah, she's probably got a lot that we don't know
Yeah,
about her that would be really interesting to find out.
absolutely.
So Paisley Mott gets a Netflix show. Who would you cast? I don't know if you know actors. I don't, but is
I
there
do.
anybody you would
I do.
cast
Yeah,
for Paisley Mott?
absolutely. I have a list actually because
Oh, okay.
I've been trying to get this show made for a while.
Okay.
But there is an actress named Caitlin Dever who is
Hmm.
she if you're watching the new season of The Last of Us,
Okay.
she's in that season. She was on a show called Justified. She was in a show called, was it Dope Sick or Sick, something about that dealt with the opioid crisis. But
Hmm.
oh, and she was in Booksmart. If you saw the movie Booksmart, she was one of the leads in Booksmart. Just an amazing young actress with insane uh, ability for both delivering dramatic feeling and intent with her face, but also has insane comic timing. She's just
Okay.
incredibly funny, and I feel like she just really embodies everything that Paisley Mott is.
All right. Fantastic. I do hope that would be a very good Netflix show. Definitely.
I think it would be pretty good, and when I have discussed it with a producer friend, we talked about like each book would make a perfect like season.
Season. Yep.
Yeah,
Definitely would.
and so I would really like for that to happen at some point.
All right. So, this has been a really good conversation, and I could probably talk to you for hours, but we should probably finish. Where can people buy your book, and where can people follow you to hear more about what's coming for you for the future?
Yeah, so my books are available pretty much anywhere you can buy books, in Barnes and Noble, Amazon, my website, calvinellis.com, if you want signed copies. It currently only has options to ship to the US, but I am willing to ship, wherever. Um, and Audible, the Paisley Mott books are on Audible now. I am currently recording. I'm narrating "Bury Your Body Somewhere" or "Bury My Body Somewhere Nice."
Hmm.
So once that's done, that'll be available on Audible too. Yeah, and then you can follow me on social media, Calvin Ellis on Instagram, the Calvin Ellis, I think, on X, but I'm not really there anymore. Calvin Ellis on Blue Sky, I think. Yeah, I mean, and if you go to my website, all the links are there to get to my social media stuff. So,
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was really interesting to pick your brain. I'm gonna have to do it again because there's so much more I
I
want
would
to
love that.
know. Um, but it's time to say goodbye. So,
All right. Well, thank you so much.
yeah,
This has been
thank you.
fantastic. Happy to talk anytime.
Okay, take care. Thank you so
You too.
much.
Bye.
Bye. And let's talk and let's stay with me and let's have a conversation with Calvin Ellis about his writing, his life, and what brought him to the point where he is giving us these amazing books. Thank you so much for staying and watching the podcast. If you'd like to see more Calvin Ellis, be sure to follow him on the social media below. Check out his new book, Bury My Body Somewhere Nice. It is absolutely amazing, especially if you're into short horror stories. And he's just an all-around great person. So I would definitely, check out his social media, read his books, and just become a fan because I definitely am.